For the second transfer window running, Jorgen Strand Larsen looks to be on the move in the final few days. Hello everybody, good evening, welcome to the Transfer Show. The price being discussed for Strand Larsen is a big one, and more than one club are after him too. We'll hear where things stand as the clock ticks down. Jean-Philippe Mateta's future is also in doubt ahead of Monday's 7 p.m. deadline. Will he finally get the new club he's been seeking throughout this window? We've got the latest on his situation. Yes, hello there, welcome along. We're into the final few days of the Oh, Randall Kolo Muani there. I've completely missed him, but we are going to keep you updated on whether or not he might be looking out of his loan move at Tottenham. And there is a big free agent on the market as of yesterday. Where will Raheem Sterling call home at the end of this month? Hello everybody, welcome to the Transfer Show. We need some big hitters to help us go through all of that. I need people just to get me through the top menu. I didn't do a particularly good job. We've got Dharmesh Sheth, we've got James Savundra. They're here to bring us up to speed with all of those. And I think we'll start with the name at the top that I didn't stumble over is Jorgen Strand Larsen and this big money move for a player who has one Premier League goal this season. Where are we at?
Well, earlier today on Transfer Talk, we reported that Crystal Palace were in advanced talks with Wolves to sign Jorgen Strand Larsen. A £50 million package was discussed, understood to include a £45 million guarantee fee plus £5 million in add-ons. And there was a feeling around lunchtime today that the clubs were close to reaching an agreement. But this evening, we understand that the deal hangs in the balance. Intermediaries are believed to have communicated to Wolves that Palace are ready to walk away from this deal. However, separately, I've been told by separate sources that that's not the case and talks are ongoing. So things do remain unclear and in the balance right now. One thing you could speculate is that a package worth around £50 million for a player, as you rightly say, has struggled with form this season. He was brilliant last season, his first season in the Premier League at Wolves, helped guiding them to safety. 14 goals, non-penalty goals in the Premier League in his debut campaign. But this season, just one Premier League goal. Form has been an issue for Strand Larsen and for Wolves, bottom of the table right now. There also at the same time remains uncertainty around Jean-Philippe Mateta. But tonight we understand that the deal to bring Jorgen Strand Larsen from Wolves to Crystal Palace remains in the balance. It shows how quickly things can move in a single day in a transfer window. This morning we were hearing that talks were advanced between Wolves and Crystal Palace and that a bid was going to be handed into Wolves which would have been accepted for £50 million for that guaranteed fee of £45 million plus £5 million in add-ons. But as we understand things now, things hang in the balance and we'll continue to work away behind the scenes to work out exactly what is going on and whether or not this deal is on, whether this deal is off.
And I wonder whether the ears at Ellen Road have been collectively pricked up with the news that maybe this deal for Jorgen Strand Larsen from Wolves to Crystal Palace is now in the balance, because Leeds United, who have been interested throughout this window in Strand Larsen, remain interested in the striker as well. But currently they're not willing to go above £40 million in a transfer fee. Now, I don't think Leeds United find themselves under any pressure to sign Jorgen Strand Larsen. I think they're looking at this as, look, this is an opportunity that we might be able to take here, a unique market opportunity, if you like. And they're unlikely to go back into the market for another striker if they can't get Jorgen Strand Larsen. Now, Leeds United, they play Arsenal on Saturday, and Daniel Farke, their manager, has been speaking to the media ahead of that game. And while he wouldn't speak directly on Jorgen Strand Larsen, he did give us a little insight into what it would be like in the final few days of this window for Leeds.
Normally in January, just players are available who have a problem at their former club or haven't played that much or come out of injuries. But these type of players won't make us better because of the privileged situation we are in. So that means if you want to find a player who improves you, then it could cost lots of money. And the problem is in January, because everyone knows this and everyone knows that there are limited options available. you could pay overpriced for players. And this is also what I don't want us to do. So it's important that also in January, with all ambitions that we have, but that we don't risk then also like our future.
Yeah, so Leeds have obviously got Dominic Calvert-Lewin banging goals in, but always good to have a backup. On Jorgen Strand Larsen, I was at the Wolves game early in the season when they played Everton, and he was up in the stands, and at the time it looked like he was going to Newcastle. So I pointed out the fact, you've made the point, he's only scored 1 goal all season. In mitigation, he had his head more than turned earlier in the season.
Yeah, and it was clear that I think he'd have loved that move to Newcastle. Newcastle in the end didn't come up with the money which Wolves wanted, and clearly Wolves' asking price has lessened in this transfer window, and in the summer if he doesn't move then it will further lessen, because if they're a championship club then they won't be able to get this sort of money in that window. So Wolves may be in a situation where they need to come down on their valuation in the final few days of this transfer window. So we wait to see what the cause is for this potential hold-up or why talks may have stalled. But you can understand why a club like Crystal Palace may be having second thoughts about spending that sort of money on a player who has been out of form so far this season. I think what this tells us, and when you consider the amount of money being considered for the likes of Jean-Philippe Mateta, who has 1 goal in his last 10 Premier League games, a fee of around £45 million being discussed for Jorgen Strand Larsen, who's got 1 Premier League goal this season, it does highlight the fact is strikers come at a premium. There's not many goal scorers or guaranteed goal scorers you have in the Premier League. I think Igor Thiago and Erling Haaland are the only strikers who have more than 10 goals in the Premier League this season. Semenyo's been brilliant so far, but he's not a natural striker. But it does show number 9s, there's not many of them, which is why the price is so high for them. Even Wolves, a club who perhaps have a need to sell, why they are still holding on for a fee as high as they can.
James says strikers are at a premium. And, I mean, Newcastle United really went for him. And this was against the backdrop of the uncertain future at that time of Alexander Isak. And as much as the narrative might have been, no, we want to bring in Jorgen Strand Larsen in tandem with Alexander Isak, I think privately they were thinking, look, if Isak goes, we need to sort ourselves out. And they really did go for it. They bid £50 million. That was rejected. They bid £55 million. And that was probably their limit. They said, right, we're out now. We're going to move on to other targets. And so it proved. Alexander Isak went, Nick Voltemada came in to Newcastle United. So I can see what you're saying. Yeah, you know, when you're a player like Jorgen Strand Larsen playing for Wolves and then a club like Newcastle United comes in for you, clearly your head is going to be turned. But look, we're in January now and Wolves were in big trouble at the wrong end. I'm wondering now whether Wolves' approach has slightly changed in this window now, simply because they are now going to be in a position. There's João Gomez is being linked with a move away. Strand Larsen clearly being linked with a move away. They have to almost make it look like, yes, we are fighting to stay in this league and we're going to make signings in this league to try and stay up, even though it looks next to impossible. It will be the greatest escape in Premier League history if they were to get out of it. But one other thing they have to keep in mind is if the worst case scenario does happen, which is likely to happen, and they go down into the Championship, do they need to cut their cloth accordingly in this transfer window as well? Because do they need to bring in players in this window that not only will give them a half a fighting chance of staying up, but also to come straight back up if they were to go down into the Championship? Furthermore, these players, these big name players that are being linked away from the club, they want to try and get as much money for them as they can, because how much value will they have in this January transfer window compared if they are a Championship club come the summer? Will the price be reduced then?
Yeah, the Championship tax if you are relegated. It's something worth bearing in mind. So I wonder if the sliding tiles are all falling into place. Jorgen Strand Larsen looks like he's headed for Crystal Palace. What does that mean for this man behind us, Jean-Philippe Mateta?
Well, there's been interest in him throughout this window. There was interest last summer as well. Jean-Philippe Mateta wants a new challenge now. He wants to play for a club who are in the Champions League, or if not, can compete to play in the Champions League next season. Nottingham Forest put in a bid. They're not a club in the Champions League. They're not a club that will be playing in the Champions League next season either. Unless they win the Europa League, then they will qualify, and they're still right in the race to do that. But they put in a bid earlier on this week worth around £35 million. We understand that Crystal Palace are looking for around £40 million for their top scorer, but a player who is out of contract next summer, less than 18 months to go on that contract, and contract negotiations have stalled. Jean-Philippe Mateta wants a new challenge. What complicates things even further is that the two sides play this weekend at the City Ground, live on Sky Sports. And it's thought that Palace are unlikely to respond to this £35 million offer, which is coming at the start of this week, until after the match on Sunday. The deadline is on Monday at 7 o'clock. So clearly there's not a huge amount of time. But what that does mean is that Mateta's future looks increasingly likely to go right down to the wire on deadline day. He continues to train with the Crystal Palace first team, and whilst there has been all this speculation, and whilst he's been carrying a knock as well, he continues to play for Crystal Palace, albeit not at the level that we've seen in the previous 18 months, but he continues to prepare for this game on Sunday. We'll be hearing from Oliver Glasner tomorrow around 1:30 on Sky Sports News. Fascinating what he has to say this week. It tends to be blockbuster, but we wait to see what happens. There's a lot of time between now and 1:30 when he speaks. Will this Strand Larsen deal be confirmed? Will that be on, off? What has happened with Mateta as well? Because we know there has been interest from clubs in Italy. One club we understand aren't looking to sign Mateta in this window are Tottenham Hotspur.
Aside, just one more point on that, aside of the fact that they're playing each other, and that's, I mean, the fixture computer's been pretty cheeky there. But if you go back to the summer, I mean, what's the relationship like between these two clubs? Because Nottingham Forest, you know, after that appeal, got into the Europa League at Crystal Palace's expense. Crystal Palace then dropped down into the Europa Conference League. And you wonder, with that relationship, you think, oh, would they do business with each other? Well, a player's got 18 months left on his contract. Crystal Palace would have to entertain offers for Jean-Philippe Mateta. They don't want to get in a position where he stays in this window, if he is to stay, and then come the summer, you're looking at 6 months away now from being able to talk to clubs outside the Premier League.
Especially if he's not scoring as well, because that value is going to plummet as well. That might be the only concrete offer they get in this window, £35 million, and they might get to the summer having not accepted that, thinking, we can't get anywhere near that in this summer with 12 months left in his contract. And as Darmish rightly said, next January he'll be able to sign a pre-contract agreement. They don't want another Mark Gay situation.
No, they definitely don't want another Mark Gay situation. I think Glasner probably wants none of it, but it's looking like 1 in, 1 out at Palace. Maybe 2 in, actually. Where are we at with a loan signing for Evan Gasson?
Well, let's give Crystal Palace some positive news, the fans there. They are close to making another signing. Evan Gasson has been travelling to London today. Palace have agreed a deal with Aston Villa to sign him on loan until the end of the season. We understand that there is an option to buy him in the summer. What is really interesting here is that Crystal Palace have had an interest in Evan Gasson in previous transfer windows. He's been a player they've wanted to sign, but he joined Aston Villa in the summer. Clearly things haven't worked so far at Aston Villa. He's yet to score in the Premier League, just 6 starts so far. Aston Villa fans may wonder why they're letting go of another player. They've just let go of Daniel Marlon. Yes, he has been replaced somewhat with Tammy Abraham, but Evan Gasson wants to stay in the Premier League. There has been interest from other clubs across Europe, but he wants to stay in the Premier League, and perhaps this could be a perfect fit. Crystal Palace need players in attacking areas to get them away from trouble and potentially end the season on a real high. They're still in the Conference League, and because the table is so condensed, they can still have a really good and a really high Premier League finish. With Gasson there, with Brennan Johnson there, potentially with Jorgen Strand Larsen as well. The start of the month felt pretty desperate for Crystal Palace fans, knowing the manager was going to depart, knowing Mark Gay was leaving, knowing Mateta wants to depart. Things could change so much in the next few days. They've got that huge game at the City Ground. Let's bear in mind how close those two sides are on the table right now. I think if Forest win on Sunday, they go level on points with Crystal Palace. You know the problems that Forest have been in the bottom of the table. Crystal Palace are sliding down the table right now. But things could change very quickly. If they get these deals done right, they get a result this weekend, things suddenly start looking much brighter.
It's so perfect, isn't it, when the two sides play each other on the weekend? It happened at the start of the season, I remember, with Isak and Liverpool and Newcastle. Great for us here at Sky Sports News. Let's focus on a man who is looking for a new club but isn't necessarily in a rush to sign before deadline day, Darmish. Raheem Sterling.
Yeah, I mean, 4:30 yesterday, Chelsea announced that there was a mutual agreement for effectively terminating the remaining 18 months of Raheem Sterling's contract. So he became a free agent. And we said at the time that his phone would be blowing up straight after that mutual agreement was announced. That's simply because he's not tied down now, and he won't be putting clubs off because of the wages that he was on at Chelsea. He starts again from scratch, effectively. He was on £325,000 a week. To get a move from Chelsea while he's still a Chelsea player is going to be very, very difficult. Even a loan move, even if a club wanted to do 50-50 with those wages, it's still a substantial wage that they would have to pay. Now he's a free agent. The phone has been blowing up by all accounts because his representatives have been in talks with 7 Champions League level clubs. And we're told that Raheem Sterling is fit and he's ready to play. He just needs to get some match fitness because he hasn't played for a while. He joined Chelsea, remember him back in 2022. Last game for them, though, was in May 2024. He had that loan spell at Arsenal last season. Wasn't as successful as Arsenal or him would have wanted it to be, but he hasn't actually played in 8 months, which is incredible to think when you think about in the last 2 or 3 years how much of a fixture he was in the England team in major tournaments, and he hasn't played any football for 8 months. But now that we've got this mutual agreement, I think you're going to see a load more clubs coming in for Raheem Sterling.
Just very quickly, so the deadline doesn't apply to Raheem Sterling because he's a free agent, but is there a deadline that does apply to those players in that situation?
Right, so I'm still awaiting confirmation of this. I've got to call in with the Premier League, but from what I'm reading, what can happen is that a free agent can sign for a club at any time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can play for the club at any time.
He doesn't need to be at a club and not play. He's had that.
Exactly. So what happens here is within around 2 weeks is what the usual window is. After the window closes, that's when the registration deadline is. So 2 weeks after the window closes, it's around that time. I'm still waiting for a precise date on this one from the Premier League. They're actually looking it up for me at this moment in time. But if it is to be around 2 weeks, so say, for example, we know that the window closes on the 2nd of February. Say around the 16th of February, say, for example, that is the registration deadline. If Raheem Sterling is signed by a Premier League club before the 16th of February and he's registered, then he's fine to play. If he is signed by a Premier League club, but he's not registered until after February the 16th, from what I can gather, he wouldn't be allowed to play for that club because you've got to have certain limits on players because windows are there for a reason.
Yeah.
You're free to sign.
Otherwise, clubs might supercharge their title push in April or something.
You're free to sign a player at any time if they're a free agent, but there is a registration deadline that you have to comply with.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be quite exciting to see what Raheem Sterling decides to do next. As Darmish is saying there, 7 Champions League level clubs interested in signing him. There's still plenty he's got left to do at the top table of world football, you'd think, because things have been very unfortunate for him in terms of how they've played out at Chelsea. I don't think he's necessarily done anything wrong. He was signed by Thomas Tuchel and he started that season well after joining from Manchester City. But then Tuchel was sacked very early on in that season. There's been 8 different managers in the time that he's joined the football club, if you include interims such as Callum McFarlane. And he did show glimpses under Mauricio Pochettino, the player that we know how good he's been, the levels he hit at Manchester City, the amount of silverware he picked up in that time as well. I think that's all behind him now. I think there was a feeling, why didn't he try and force a move whilst he was at Chelsea? But it wasn't his decision to give himself a 5-year contract on £325,000 a week. That's a decision that Chelsea made, that this ownership group made. So he was well in his right
He was the first
to bide his time.
Big statement signing by the new owners, and then they completely changed direction.
Completely changed direction, didn't they? They went from signing superstars like Sterling and Aubameyang to then recruiting young players, and he didn't have a place there. But ultimately, they gave him that contract, and it'll be fascinating to see what he does next. He's ready for a fresh start at a new club. We wait to see what he does next.
Yeah, we wait with bated breath. Over to you, Raheem. Now, after the break, we're going to be focusing on this man. Oscar Bobb looks to be on the move, but where do things sit on his proposed move to Fulham? We'll bring you right up to speed. Stay with us.
That's Premier League Friday, Sky Sports News, 5 o'clock.
Always a terrific watch. Join Roman and his guests Mark Schwarzer and Ashley Williams for your essential guide to the weekend's action, as well as that interview with Dean Henderson. We'll also hear from the Man United boss Michael Carrick. It's all from 5 o'clock right here on Sky Sports News. OK, let's focus on West Ham. They're saying goodbye to a big name, as you can see behind me, but as they try to stay in the Premier League, we're also looking at some late window business there too. Dharmesh, what is the state of play with the Lucas Paquetá deal?
Just waiting now, we think, for a formal announcement, because everything is agreed between the two clubs, West Ham United and Flamengo. He made it clear that not only did he want to leave West Ham, but he only wanted to go to Flamengo, where he started his career. £36.5 million is the transfer fee. Flamengo are kind of teasing this signing because there was a social media post which showed the number 20 shirt, which will be Lucas Paquetá's shirt for Flamengo. He hasn't played in their last 3 games for West Ham United, and they got through in the FA Cup against QPR, and they got 6 points out of 6. So life after Paquetá, they had a taster for it. It will begin in earnest, of course, against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge on Saturday. And Nuno Espirito Santo was speaking ahead of that game against Chelsea and, of course, was asked about this move of Paquetá from West Ham United to Flamengo. Here's what he said.
It's not official yet, so with the club, we have allowed him to travel to do his medical. But like I said, I think we found a solution that everybody was aware and came to a good conclusion. Lucas was clear that he wanted to return home. For me, Lucas is a special player and a special person. He's a number 10, I tell you many times. I think he in terms of club, was not the proper way if you want. I think everything could be different, but the circumstances is what it is. He wanted to go to Brazil.
How could things have been different?
If it was in the moment of the season, if we were not in the situation that we are 2 years ago, we knew what happened with Lucas, so many things have happened to come to this end. You cannot replace Lucas because he's unique. He's a number 10 that has special qualities. You cannot find many players like Lucas in the transfer window. You cannot find him. We have to move forward what we have.
So West Ham have to move forward. James, they've already made some moves in this window, 3 moves in this window.
They've really backed Nuno Espirito Santo, haven't they? Because at one point they were 8 points adrift of safety and there were question marks around the manager, despite the fact he's not been there a huge period of time. But things are starting to look a little bit better now. 3 wins on the bounce and 3 signings as well in this window. Tati Castellanos and Pablo have been involved and they've been impressive. And we've seen Crescencio Somerville and Jared Bowen return to form as well. The attack has been addressed with Adama Traore being signed yesterday. We wait to see what sort of impact he has in the final few months of this window. We know defence is being looked at. I think West Ham fans, if you ask them heading into this transfer window, what do you want? They'd say a centre-back. That's despite the vast amount of money West Ham have spent on centre-backs over the course of the last few years. We know Igor Julio has been allowed to return to Brighton. West Ham signed him on loan on deadline day in the summer, but he's not really a feature for them. So that will be a priority for them in the final few days of this window. And Nuno also spoke about that. What is he hoping for from West Ham in these final few days of the window? Let's bear in mind, West Ham still 5 points adrift of safety.
It's okay. I think we still have days to go. The club is working very hard. There are negotiations that's still ongoing. I'm not going to tell you which positions, but there are things that are ongoing and we expect things to happen. And like I said, from the beginning of the transfer window, it's all about rebalance the squad, trying to make the squad more competitive, having options and solutions that can allow us to keep fighting.
OK, let's move on to a sale for Manchester City. Oscar Bobb is on his way. Dharmesh?
Yeah, again, rather like Lucas Paquetá, I think we're just waiting for a formal announcement on this one. He's been having a medical after the clubs agreed a £27 million deal. Now, Manchester City, while agreeing that £27 million deal, inserted a 20% sell-on clause and a matching clause as well. So if, in the future, Fulham sell Oscar Bobb to another club, Manchester City will have the right to match that bid and then put themselves in the equation to try and re-sign Oscar Bobb. That's a long, long way into
That's a legacy of Cole Palmer, isn't it?
Yes, Yeah, I think so. I mean, but to be fair though, Manchester City tend to put these sell-on clauses and matching rights into a lot of the agreements that they have with other clubs. Particularly more recently, you could be right. It could be as a result of what happened with Cole Palmer. Fulham are at Manchester United, of course, on Sunday. For Oscar Bobb to feature in that game, he would have to be registered by midday tomorrow. That's the deadline. But having looked at the injury situation, he hasn't played since the middle of December. So I think he's currently injured at the moment. Whether he's totally fit now or not, I don't think Pep Guardiola has been asked that question recently, simply because all the talk for Oscar Bobb has been, is he going to stay at Manchester City or not? I'd be very surprised if he was to feature against Manchester United, given the injury worries that he's got. But it looks like it's a matter of time when this one does get announced. But £27 million is the deal. Soon to become a Fulham player is Oscar Bobb.
Yeah, rival fans of Manchester City will always point to the fact that they spend a lot of money and checkbook manager, yada, yada, yada. But actually, as a club, they really do tick over the sales, don't they? Which helps their PSR
know
situation.
They do great on sales. A lot of other clubs could take a leaf out of Manchester City's books and find out how to do these kind of things when it comes to transfers. But, yeah, and it's always looked at, isn't it? Oh, look how much money a club has spent when... Should we really be looking at the net spend as well sometimes? Because Liverpool are always accused of £450 million in the summer, and yet they recouped, £300 million of that as well. So
it's worth bearing in mind how much business City have done in the last 12 months. When they signed Mark Gay, that took it to £445 million over the space of 12 months, because they did so much business last January because the injury issues they had. The fact is they were trying to defend the Premier League title. They came close to missing out on qualifying for the Champions League. But when you look at the business they've done, as Darmis rightly said, they got £30 million for James McAtee in the summer. They got a huge amount of money for Julian Alvarez last summer as well. Over £20 million for Taylor Harwood-Bellis going to Southampton. Cole Palmer, Aymeric Laporte, Riyad Mahrez the season before. They continue to sell well, which means they are well equipped when it comes to fulfilling their PSR requirements.
Yeah. So we watch this space on Oscar Bobb. Defensive injuries piling up at Liverpool, though. So will we see some late business from them in this window? They're our focus next. A little earlier on, we were talking about Raheem Sterling, who this time yesterday was announced as a free agent. Now, Dharmesh, we were talking earlier about the deadline doesn't apply so directly to players that are free agents. Jesse Lingard, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain as well, and you've had an update on this.
Yeah, we were saying before that the player registration, it should be noted here, for the summer window is usually 2 weeks after that window closes in the summer. It's slightly different for the winter window, and I'll read you the key information regarding this. It is to do with the fourth Thursday in March, so it'll be March the 26th. The fourth Thursday in March is the traditional player registration deadline for the English Football League, the EFL. I'm told by the Premier League that it is the same for the Premier League as well. So a player who is a free agent, can sign at any time they want to a club, but for Premier League and EFL clubs, if they want to play for them in that season, they have to be registered by the fourth Thursday in March, which is the 26th of March, 2026. Ideally, they'd want free agents in a long way before then and registered a long way before then so that they can maximise their game time. But if they were deciding whether to bring in a free agent and they were delaying it, they've got until the fourth Thursday in March, March the 26th, to sign that player and to register them so that they can play a part for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, brilliant update. It feels like absolutely ages away, but that is the deadline, hot off the press from Dharmesh. OK, Liverpool are our next focus for us. Now, Jeremy Frimpong got injured last night. Where are we with Liverpool? Are they expected to dip their toe back in the market to cover that?
It doesn't look like they will, which will disappoint Liverpool fans, because I think Liverpool fans are looking for some defensive reinforcements. But we understand that things aren't necessarily going to change after what happened with Jeremy Frimpong yesterday. It looks like he's going to miss the game this weekend against Newcastle. But the club in general, under this ownership group, don't want to make reactive moves in this transfer market. They'd rather stick with a long-term plan, and their long-term plan remains unchanged, because you don't want to be in a situation whereby you're signing another right-back and then you start next season with Conor Bradley, Jeremy Frimpong and another right-back fit. So unless there is somebody they're looking at for the future who becomes available in this window, it doesn't look like they're going to do anything. They'll remain alert if any of those long-term targets do become available in the final 4 days of this window. But I think they're readily happy with the options they have to replace those two defenders who I mentioned, Frimpong and Conor Bradley as well, because Joe Gomez can play there when he's fit. We've seen Dominic Szoboszlai, he can play anywhere on the pitch for Liverpool. He's been their player of the season so far. So there are options there. Curtis Jones could play there as well. So I think it's disappointing news for Liverpool fans listening to us today on Sky Sports News, but it looks unlikely they're going to do any business in this winter window.
Where are we at with Andy Robertson? Looked like he was cast iron set for Tottenham.
At the moment, he's not going anywhere. He started the game for Liverpool in the Champions League last night against Qarabağ. He came on against Bournemouth in the Premier League on Saturday. I just wonder, with 4 days to go, whether there is the possibility of a late twist in this one, though, simply because his contract, we know, is up in the summer. It looked very close to him moving to Tottenham Hotspur. We heard that, in principle, personal terms might have been agreed. There was a closer agreement between the two clubs. However, when Arne Slot was asked the question before that Qarabağ game on match day -1 on Tuesday, he was asked definitively, will he be here beyond the end of this transfer window? He didn't commit to that. All he would say is he expects Andy Robertson to be at the club beyond the end of this transfer window. Now, I think another key to this is going to be who Liverpool potentially could bring in if Andy Robertson was to go, because that is going to be key. James alluded to it there. They're unlikely to bring anyone in, but, you know, some of the defensive injuries they're a breaking point just now. So they will probably need someone like Andrew Robertson for the rest of the season. However, they do have a left-back who's currently on loan at Roma, Kostas Tsimikas. Now, he's only started 4 Serie A games so far this season. I put it to Gianluca Di Marzio, would Roma, for our Sky Italy reporter, would Roma be prepared to allow Kostas Tsimikas to come back to Liverpool? So could the loan be broken? And he said he's hardly starting, so ... Intrigue.
I think if I was a Liverpool fan, I'd rather keep Andy Robertson until the end of the season and allow him to go as a free agent. I guess as fans, we don't really care about the money, do we? But you'd think if the option was Andy Robertson, who's played more than 20 games already this season, or recalling Kostas Tsimikas, who became the third choice left back, who hasn't played in the Premier League this season, who hasn't been getting opportunities starting. You'd think, yes, he may have ambitions to play a lot more football this season. He'll probably get a lot of Liverpool this season. I'll be very surprised if he leaves in these final days, unless they can have a resolution where Tsimikas comes back. I think if I was a Liverpool fan, I think if I was on a slot, I'd be wanting to keep Andy Robertson there right now.
I think the key is going to be Tsimikas, and also you've got to look at it from Roma's perspective as well. If they were to let him go, then there's that chain as well. Well, we'll need to bring in another left back. So quite a few things would have to fall into place for it to happen.
All of a sudden, Tsimikas holds the power.
But for the deal to have gone that far, you could safely assume that Andrew Robertson was bang up for going to Tottenham Hotspur. Maybe in those discussions he was told, you're going to be playing probably a lot more football than you would get at Liverpool just now.
Or he could wait and he'll have the pick of wherever he wants to go after a World Cup with Scotland. On to Chelsea. James, Axel Disasi's name has come up a lot in the past few days. He was in the bomb squad. He's now out of the bomb squad. Is he on the move?
Well, I guess he's the final member of the bomb squad, even though he's back in first team training. Now, Fiorentina were interested in signing him in this window. There's a number of clubs across Europe who would like to sign him ideally in this transfer window. But Fiorentina's move for Disasi has stalled, according to our colleagues at Sky in Italy. They're yet to receive an indication that Disasi actually wants to join them. They believe he wants to stay in the Premier League, and they believe he wants to stay specifically in London, which rules out quite a few options in the Premier League. If he wants to stay in London, he's not going to stay at Chelsea. West Ham looking for a centre-back. I'm not sure whether or not they'd like to come in for him. I understand Crystal Palace aren't looking at him as an option right now. In the past, Sunderland, West Ham and Bournemouth have expressed interest. So we wait to see what happens there. I think our understanding was earlier on this week that Disasi would find a move outside of Chelsea by the end of this transfer window. With Sterling departing, Disasi was seen as the next man to also get a move away. But it doesn't look like it's going to be Fiorentina at this moment in time. A lot could change in the final few days of this window. I'm sure he wants to play football again. But of course, as is the case with Raheem Sterling, it's got to be the right move for him as well. Where
are Chelsea in their pursuit of Jeremy Jacquet from Rennes?
Well, it feels like not a huge amount has changed over the course of the last few days. We understand that Jacquet would like to move to Chelsea and has expressed his wishes to join Chelsea. We know there's been plenty of interest in trying to sign him in this window and potentially in the summer, when I think Rennes would rather do a deal in the summer as well, because talks have been ongoing with Chelsea for a long period of time. They want to keep him until the summer, which means they're really driving a hard price in terms of what they're willing to sell him for in this window. We understand Rennes want around £56 million. Thus far, Chelsea have been reluctant to meet that asking price. But Chelsea, because they know the likes of Bayern Munich and Liverpool have been linked with signing him in the summer, they want to try to sign him now, get ahead of the competition and fill a void which they feel they have at centre-back right now. I think he fits a certain type of profile that could come in and play at centre-back in a back three or in a back two as well. We know they still have a lot of centre-backs, Chelsea, but not perhaps the right profile which they want between now and the end of the season.
From West London to North London, let's focus on Tottenham, Dharmesh. They're into the knockout phases of the Champions League. But Randall Kolo Muani scored last night in their win over Eintracht Frankfurt. But his situation seems a little murky.
Yeah, so he's currently on loan, Randall Kolo Muani, at Tottenham Hotspur from Paris Saint-Germain. He also enjoyed a really successful loan spell last season at Juventus. Now, Sky Italy are reporting that Juventus want to bring him back, but that would require Tottenham breaking that loan from PSG. However, Spurs have currently no intention of cutting that loan short for Randall Kolo Muani. He's made 24 appearances so far this season. He scored 3 goals. You mentioned one of them in the Champions League last night. The other 2 came in the Champions League as well against his parent club, Paris Saint-Germain, because the rules have been changed over the last few years, haven't they? If you come from a club, you can still play against them in the Champions League. So as it stands, Kolo Muani will be staying at Tottenham Hotspur. They've got so many injury issues throughout that squad that I think the priority at the moment would be to bring players in rather than to shift players out. But if they were to bring the right player in the position that Kolo Muani is in at the moment, then you never know. Still 4 days to go. Could something still happen? But Juventus definitely interested. Tottenham, as it stands, not interested in allowing him to go.
But Tottenham's fans will be hoping that players will be coming in between now and deadline day.
100%. They've got so many injury issues at the moment. I mean, last week there was a point where Thomas Frank had 11 outfield players that he could call upon. He couldn't fill the bench. There was like more than one goalkeeper on the bench as well. It was looking really, really bad for him. That some of these players are now starting to come back into the reckoning. They're starting to regain their fitness, but they've still got such a long injury list. And I think, there's been so much conjecture about Thomas Frank and his position at Tottenham Hotspur. It's hard, I guess, unless you're an Arsenal fan and some of the Tottenham fans who have been booing Thomas Frank, not to feel a degree of sympathy for him, simply because some of the fans have been almost complaining about the style of football that they've been presented with, particularly at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this season, and the creativity's not really been there. When you look at it, Mohamed Kudus, their big summer signing, he's been out for a few weeks and he's going to be out for a certain length of time still. And two of their most creative players, Dejan Kulusevski, James Maddison, Thomas Frank hasn't even had the opportunity to be able to pick those two players in any of his teams or any of his squads so far this season. So I think once these players start getting fit, is that the time to judge Thomas Frank? But it doesn't work like that, does it?
They do want reinforcements. They're looking for wide forwards, but it's worth bearing in mind their fixture list in February. They'll want reinforcements. Manchester City at home, Manchester United away, Newcastle at home, and they round off the month with the North London derby.
Oof, that is a big month for Tottenham Hotspur, although they always like playing Manchester City, don't they? Right, stick with us on the transfer show. Yassin Ayari has made himself a fixture in the Brighton side, banged in a screamer against Fulham at the weekend, but a Premier League rival are interested in signing him. More on that next. And welcome back. Big reminder, huge night in the Europa League with Villa, Forest, Celtic and Rangers all in action. We're going to bring you updates in the Sports Centre from 8. You'll be able to see all the goals from tonight's matches on Sky Sports News right here from 11 p.m. as well. OK, final part of the programme. Let's focus on Nottingham Forest. James, another name that's been linked with them. This time it's a midfielder. What news do you have?
Yes, in Ayari, who scored a brilliant goal, didn't he, at the weekend, albeit in a losing cause for Brighton against Fulham. We understand Nottingham Forest have made a bid believed to be around £20 million for Ayari. We've been told that bid has been rejected. Brighton have no desire to sell the midfielder. He's been a key part of their team this season, starting 17 Premier League matches, and this bid falls below Brighton's valuation of the player. So Forest right now, with 4 days left of this transfer window, 5 points above the drop zone, are deciding whether or not they'll make an increased offer. The player would get a significant pay rise, we understand, if he was to move to the City ground. Brighton paid around £3.5 million for him 3 years ago. It just shows how good they've been at business in the past in terms of buying players young and then eventually selling them high. But I don't think Brighton want to sell him in this window unless they're given an offer which they can't refuse.
It would be a lot of profit, but it's nowhere near the number that Tony Bloom and Brighton have in mind, clearly. Forest have been linked with a lot of players in this window. How have you rated their approach to the January transfer window?
I feel it's been pretty scattergun, really, when you look at their approach, when you look at what they did in the summer. I mean, they signed Arno Kalimuendu, who did really, really well in Ligue 1 last season. Didn't get a look in, a striker. He's gone out on loan now, and they've already signed Lorenzo Luca, but they want to also sign Jean-Philippe Mateta. So it feels like they're stockpiling strikers. A man we almost forgot about, Taiwo Awoniyi, scored the second goal for them at the weekend against Brentford. At the same time, John Victor is injured, so they're looking to sign Jose Sarr. That makes sense. But then they put in an inquiry to sign Lewis Dunk from Brighton as well. It feels like they're just thinking, right, let's throw a load of names out there, see what we can do, because we want to do everything we can to ensure we stay up. If that one player makes one contribution that keeps us up in the Premier League, then that's going to be worthwhile, and we'll deal with what that means in terms of PSR, score cost ratio rules in the summer. We just need to get the players in who we think can do a job. But I think when you look at their hit rate in terms of signings over the course of the last few years since they've been in the Premier League, usually it's about a 50% success rate when you look at transfers. For Nottingham Forest, it feels much lower than that, albeit the players that have paid off for them, the likes of Morgan Gibb White, the likes of Chris Wood, really have paid off. So it's been an interesting approach, but clearly they know what they're doing. They've stayed up in the Premier League so far.
Dharmesh, I want to draw your attention to the Aston Villa starting team tonight. Harvey Elliott starts for Villa in the Europa League. This is a player who's seemingly in purgatory. Aston Villa don't want to play him because if they play him, they trigger the obligation to buy him. Liverpool don't particularly want to take him back. What do you read from the fact that he's in the team?
You've got to have a lot of sympathy for Harvey Elliott. He left Liverpool after winning the title last season in search of regular first-team football. He had some fantastic under-21 European Championships with England, which they won. He was the player of the tournament, scored 5 goals. Probably thought the Villa move was going to be a big platform for him to get regular first-team football in the Premier League. But Aston Villa and Unai Emery admitted as much, that they decided in October we're probably not going to trigger this obligation. So once that happens, Harvey Elliott's in a bit of limbo, because the issue he's got is a player can be registered with 3 different clubs in a season, but he can only play for 2 of them. He actually played for Liverpool before he went to Aston Villa earlier on this season. He's clearly played for Aston Villa now. He now can only move to another club if it is outside the windows that the Premier League and the other European leagues use. So hence, there's been that link with Charlotte FC in the MLS. I just wonder whether some sort of agreement can be reached between the 2 clubs, whether they can take him back to Liverpool or whether they can say, right, let's just break the clause. Take the clause out of the way so that Harvey Elliott can play with no pressure of this obligation being triggered. Because surely it would be in Liverpool's interest if, and it's a big if, he is not in the long-term plans of Liverpool, his market value is only going to go up if he is playing regular first-team football until the summer, and then they can reassess his situation then. But difficult situation for him.
Yeah, really difficult situation. And just to reiterate, the only reason that he is not playing is because Aston Villa have a few more games, and if they reach that level, they then have to buy him at a fee that they feel is not justifiable for a player of that talent with what they need as a club. Poor old Harvey Elliott. It's an awful situation. Do you think we'll get a resolution in the next couple of days? Very short answer.
I hope so, for his sake. Charlotte FC would be a great trip for him, a few months in the US, and then make a big decision on his future in the summer.
I think you're right. I think you are right. OK, stay with us, Dharmesh, James, thank you. I'm stepping into the Sports Centre next, and we're going to keep you up to speed with a busy night in the Europa League.